recorded.
This is Global Tel-Link. You have a prepaid call from
Jesse Nava.
an inmate at the Centinela State Prison, Centinela, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. You have a prepaid call. You will not be charged for this call. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel-Link.
Hello, Jesse.
Hello. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you for calling me back. So, on the last episode, we had left off at you had traded your Super Nintendo for a gun. I believe this was your second gun that you came in possession, and you had just
This is the
committed.
first gun that this is the first gun that I actually owned. But yeah, it was the second gun that I had ever had in my possession.
And then you had done your first shooting.
Right.
From there, what happened? Were there any consequences for the shooting? Did the police get involved, or nothing happened?
That was the cops showed up. They end up searching the pad. They end up getting the gun. They end up taking us to juvenile hall, and it was a trip because actually one of the dudes that was there at the pad right there where we were at, out of all the so-called homies that were right there, the only one that actually held their mud was the hyena, was my homegirl Loca. You know, like the other fool was like, oh yeah, I didn't even know that he was gonna start shooting. You know, like it's just a trip. You know, looking back at it now, you know, like that should have been a red flag from the get-go. You know, but yeah, so I ended up going to juvenile hall and they ended up putting me on probation. Eventually, they ended up releasing me to my mom. You know.
And what happened to your friend, the one that told the police what happened?
He actually ended up taking off with his family, I guess, to LA or something. Like I never seen him again after that. Like he already knew that he was going to be labeled as a rat in the neighborhood, so he basically he ended up by the time word got out, he had already taken off because, like I say, he was young still, so he had a grandpa that lived out there in LA somewhere. And he went over there with his primos and everything somewhere to LA, you know.
And for him, there wasn't any type of consequences. It did it all fall on you?
Yeah, well, I'm assuming because he got released that day from juvenile hall, you know, and when I was going to court, my lawyer was like, "Hey, man, your friend told on you, you know, like that, you know, that. Why do you think he actually went home that day, you know?" And so yeah, as far as I know, he didn't suffer any consequences. You know, he might have been, because I think he was on probation already, quiet as he's kept, and they ended up letting him go though to his parents that day, or to his mom or something.
And how long did you end up spending in juvenile hall?
It wasn't long. It was probably about a month, something like that. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but I know it wasn't long. I went to court like twice, and then they ended up releasing me to my mom. You know.
The first time you went to juvenile hall, how was the experience? Were you scared, nervous, butterflies in your stomach? What was that experience like?
Yeah. First time I went to juvenile hall, yeah, I was definitely terrified. You know, as much as I thought I was a tough kid, you know, and I thought I wasn't scared. You know, I was surprised how sitting, even with him in there before they released him, we're sitting in intake, and the staff are like, hey, you know, now you're getting housed, and JJ, you're leaving, you know, like your parents are coming to get you. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, I wasn't really tripping because I'm thinking, okay, well, both of us are going to go to the halls. He's been to the halls before. I never been to the halls, you know what I mean? Like, he's a little bit older. He was like 15. I was only 12, you know, so I was just kind of like, I was definitely scared in there. You know, you get in that little cell up in intake, that little rubber room and a little bench, and you're kind of like, man, you know, and so yeah, I was definitely scared, and I was so young though at that point in time. They used to house us in the unit with the girls. You know, they put you in the unit with the girls. So when I finally got housed, and I was kind of tripping out, like, okay, you know, like, and I remember I always had it in my mind, you know, like, hey, represent the water, you know, don't rank out, don't, you know, whatever. So of course I walked into the unit, you know, with my head held high, you know, trying to hide that fear that I had inside my head and my heart, you know, but once I realized there was girls there, and I seen seen two other kids there that I knew, you know, the fear shortly faded away, you know.
You mentioned that your homegirl held her mud. Was she let go, or what was it that happened with her? Because I don't recall hearing.
Yeah, she ended up going to the county jail. She was actually
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
she went to the county jail because she actually had a warrant for some like I don't know if it was check fraud or identity. Like she had some charges pending. I know that, and so they ended up taking her to the county jail because she was 18, and so she ended up. But yeah, when I say she held her mud, she was the only one that didn't say anything, you know, and she just took her little beef, and the police report. They asked her, you know, did you see him shooting a gun? You arrived with him. Did you see him with the gun? And she straight up told him like, nah, I didn't see him with anything. I didn't see no gun. I didn't hear no shooting. I didn't see nobody. There was nobody running. You know, she basically did what gang members were conditioned to do. You know.
And once you got released from juvenile hall, how were you embraced once you came home and everybody knew you had come home?
Oh yeah, as soon as I got out, I went straight back to the middle school. I went straight back to my barrio because, like I said, my barrio is an apartment complex, and back then everybody used to live there or hang out there. And as much as my mom tried to get us out of there, my cousin, my tia still lived there. My cousins still lived there, so I would still go back over there. And so when I got out, and and everybody was like, "Man, what happened? What happened?" You know, and of course, you know, I'm wearing it like a trophy. You know, like yeah, I dumped on them fools. You know, I handled my business. You know, and this and that, and my homegirl Loca had bailed out of the county jail, so she told everybody before I even got there. She had told everybody like, "Hey, this fool, you know, he did his thing. You know, he handled his business." And so right away when I got there, everybody's like, "That's right, fool. That's right." You know, like and. So off the top, you know, it kind of made me feel like I had did the right thing because all these people who, you know, I was so desperate to impress and so desperate to be accepted by. That's exactly what they did. You know, they gave me that praise, that recognition, that acceptance off the top. So it made me feel some kind of way. You know, so again, it just reinforced the belief and you know that ideology that there's nothing I wouldn't do for these people and there's nothing I won't do to feel this feeling of acceptance, you know.
So after that point, did your criminal activity progress?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, at an early age, my crime of choice along the way was drug dealing. You know what I mean? Like I said, I learned at an early age, you know, in that alley right there with Pitorra, that you know what I mean, like selling drugs. You know, made you important. Selling drugs got you the thing that you needed to sell, you know, like, and he was the neighborhood drug dealer and he was important. He had cars, he had clothes, he had, you know, everything you wanted. And like I said, we would hang out there with him in the alley all day. And so, for me, it was like, I knew in my head, you know, it was like, okay, you know, I want to be like this dude. This is what I want to do right here. I want, you know what I mean? And so I just like emulated his behavior. So when I got out after that time from juvenile hall with the shooting and everything, I got out. Right away, he was like, "Hey, here you go." Like he looked out, you know. He gave me a lot of stuff back then, you know, for a little 13-year-old, 12, 13-year-old kid. That you know, like getting a quarter pound of weed and you know an ounce of crystal was like that was like big shit back then, you know. So he gave me stuff, and he's like, "Hey, man, you know, you handled your business, you know, do what you do." So ultimately, like I knew that my as much as I loved, you know, being from the water and everything, I knew my ultimate objective was going to be a success. Was my intent was to be a successful drug dealer because it gave me, you know, it made me feel important. It gave me power and control over people, and that was something that I knew that I was seeking after because I seen the way people respected him and people glorified him just because he was a man in the neighborhood, you know. So I got out and ultimately I made sure that I got good at my craft. You know, I made sure that you know, and as long as I had the sack, a lot of the homies, you know, they always wanted to be around me even more so, like, oh.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And mind you, we're all kids, you know what I mean? Like all my homies in my generation, they were anywhere between the ages of 12 and 16, 17, you know what I mean? So like nobody really had anything, so to have a little bit of, you know, a little bit of the sack, like you were important, you know?
During this time, who were you living with at this time?
So at this time, I was actually living in an abandoned apartment in the alley right here in Valencia and Indio. I said I had dipped out. You know, when my mom was pretty upset about the whole situation. You know, with the gun and the shooting and all that stuff. That when I got out, she was just like, "Hey man, you know, like you got to figure out what you're gonna do right here. You know what I mean? Like, this, you can't be having this kind of stuff right here. So I was like, I don't worry about it. Like I'll take care of myself. So I ultimately would stay in Indio all the time. Mind you, she moved out of Indio. She moved out of JT. She moved out of Indio because she thought that if she could live in the outskirts of Indio, that I wouldn't, I wouldn't fall victim to the neighborhood. I wouldn't, that I'd find something else to do. She was doing whatever she could. But so I basically was living right there in an abandoned apartment in Indio on Valencia Street, and just basically selling dope at an abandoned apartment. There was an alley right there. Like anybody that's from Indio knows this area, so it's like there's an alley where there's a couple apartment complexes where people sell drugs out of, and at the time, old boy Pitorras was the one that basically had that whole little area locked in. So what he would do is he had a family, so he'd go to sleep at night, and he would leave me and my homeboy Cyclone out there in the middle of the night with straps and drogas, and basically cars would just pull up in the alley, and we'll just curb serve all night long. And in the morning time when he'll get up, he'll take us to go get breakfast, kick back, he'll take the gun back, and he'll take the clavo back, whatever. And I knew, because when he would give me that gun each night, I felt like I was God. And when he would take it back in the morning, I felt like, I felt less than. And that's why I started getting into my head, like, you know what, I'm going to get my own gun. I'm going to get my own stuff. Like, I'm not going to be under this dude's thumb forever. You know what I mean? So I was basically just living in that abandoned apartment, basically from pad to pad, between my homies' pads, sleeping on my homies' couches. But for the most part, I'd stay in that abandoned apartment, and we just leave the stove on for the fire, and there was a recliner in there, and it was just an abandoned apartment,
And by this time, you weren't going to school anymore, were you?
No, like probation would get involved, and they would try to make you go to community school. Like I went to community school for a little bit, and I got in a fight right there, got kicked out, and then they'll try to put me back at another middle school, but it wouldn't last. I would be in school, like if I might have seen from 5th grade all through 6th and 7th and 8th grade, I might have spent like a couple months in each one of those grades. I hardly ever went to school from 6th all the way to the 8th grade.
And did you have any uncles or any older figure that was trying to guide you during this time or at any point?
No, see, and that's the thing. Like, and it's a trip. It's a trip because to this day I have a mentor, a person that's part of my support network. He's actually the principal of Indio High School, and he was my first grade teacher back then. And he's the only person that I can look back over my life and say, you know what, this man actually cared. This man actually extended himself to me and made an effort to try to kind of stir me a little bit right. But aside from him, Mr. Lawson, I never had anybody that I felt could relate to me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure in juvenile hall there might have been staff and along the way there may have been somebody, but as far as having any real male role models at that point in my life, he's the only one I can ever look back in my life and say, you know what, this dude right here, he had an impact on me,
And then everybody else you had was your older homies, right? Or the people around you?
Right. Basically, dude was doing the same thing I was doing.
After that shooting, what was the next event that happened that ended up getting you arrested?
Let me see. When did I get arrested again?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I probably have to. I have my probation on reports because when I got my life sentence on this case, I got a probation report. Probably what I'll do tomorrow is I'll dig it out to be a little more specific. But I honestly can't really say what my next arrest was. But I know I ended up going in and out of placement for the next couple of years.
So you're telling me all these contact you had with the police and arrest, all those events affected your sentencing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They use it in your probation report because it kind of aggravates your sentence. I mean, I don't think it would make a difference because they got a predetermined sentence when you get convicted of murder, So, but they definitely use it